Good morning, Sarah and Governing Board Member Edmiston. Can you hear me?
Good morning, yes.
Thank you. Sarah, are you good with the audio?
studying session. This is our budget study session. It is now 9:10 a.m. Can I get a roll call?
Board Member Trujillo? Board Member Graham?
Present.
Vice President Edmiston?
Present.
President Ovalle?
Present. And with that, we have quorum. So I want to move on to pledging the allegiance.
To the flag of the United States.
Thank you so much. I move that we adopt the agenda as it is. Can I get a second?
This is Carmen, I'll second. Board Member Trujillo? Aye. Board Member Graham?
Yes.
Vice President Edmiston?
Yes.
President Ovalle?
Yes, and with that, it passes. Dr. Gonzalez, are you ready to present for us today?
I am. I don't know how to turn the mic on. Yes, I am ready to facilitate our meeting today. And I want to thank our board members who helped to create the agenda for us today and the questions that have been brought forward. And so today we're going to spend some time really delving deeply into these topics. And at the end of this, really take a look at, we want the bulk of our time to really be around that long-term planning and risk and the DSEG plan and how we're allocating those monies. We also know that it's timely, given the conversation we had about the move from the Fillmore property or from Herrera to the Fillmore property. So this conversation will help facilitate deeper understanding of that issue as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Whittle, who is going to talk about our overall budget summary.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez, Madam President, members of the board, cabinet. Thank you for allowing us to have this study session on our budget. So first, if you have a packet in front of you that has the budget study session, we'll begin with this one. And we'll go through it pretty quickly. As Dr. Gonzalez mentioned, we want to spend a lot more time on the long-term planning and the DSEG. So with the first page, I want to introduce or talk to the board. Just these are key budget factors that we play in a role when it comes to our budget. Also gave the ASRS numbers there. This is for fiscal year 26. Then this is the budget so far. The yellow is the adopted budget. The blue is the revised budget that we revised back in December. And then the far right column is where we're projected right now. And throughout this, if there's any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. So just want to show the board, when we adopted our budget, we were working a year ago on this year's budget. The weighted ADM, we thought we were going to be around 6,611. Right now, we're at 6,100. So when we talk about the 500 student loss, it's in the weighted ADM. Majority is coming from the group B weights. So special education students, we get more funding for. So 500 ADM or 500 total kids, could be conceived as, hey, we lost 500, when in reality we might have lost 300. And then the weights that those students brought makes it look like it was 500. Base level amount stays the same. Base level control limit, we reduced by about 2.8 million since our adopted budget. Transportation revenue control limit, that stays the same. And throughout this presentation, we do have some slides where we compared fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 27. And you'll see the transportation revenue control limit has not changed since fiscal year 19 to now. Audit service adjustments, 38.5, that didn't change. Revenue control limit, that's our RCL, 35 million on our adopted, 32.5 on our revised, or where we projected. Now, it's good to mention the RCL revenue control limit. That is based, our M and O override is based 15% on the RCL. So it's based on the revenue control limit. Budget balance carry forward, million we projected came in at 1.395. Additional add-ons. These are items that through legislation like Prop 123, free and reduced lunch. This is those additional add-ons where we do see those come in throughout the year. The desegregation, 11.1 million. This is another one that we're going to see in 2019 has not changed. You'll see the transportation revenue control limit and the desegregation has not changed. M&O override, again, this is 15% based on the RCL. There is a little bit of other formulas involved in it. So if you do the 32.5 million, multiply it by 15%, you're not going to get that exact number because there's some minor detail in the formula, but majority of it is based off the RCL. M&O general budget limit. You may also see this as a GBL, general budget limit. This is the overall budget for the M&O account. So we predicted, or we projected this time, or in our adopted budget, about a $52.5 million budget. As of right now, we're at 50.9 million. So we have to decrease in the overall budget on the M&O account. Any questions on that one? The next slide or the next worksheet is our capital budget. This also is, there's three names for this budget. You can either hear it as the capital budget, you'll hear it as the DAA budget, which is the District Additional Assistance, or you might hear it as the UCO budget. UCO is Unrestricted Capital Outlay. So all three of those names, we are referring to the capital budget. This one doesn't change much. The one that did change is the budget balance carry forward. Now, it's always good to keep in mind the capital budget is always based on last year's 100-day count. So we already know what fiscal year 27 capital budget is going to be right now because we've already passed the 100-day. The only thing that really can change is the base level amount. So the $549.45, that's what we get per pupil per unweighted ADM. Now, the 549.45, for about 15 years, this budget was not increased. So like the M&O budget, we get a 2% inflation rate based on our base level amount. This base level amount does not have a Constitution inflation rate at all. So you might hear, well, the school districts aren't funded properly in the capital account. This is what they're talking about. So for 15 years, it was not changed. 2000, I think it was like 2008 to 2019 or 2020 is whenever they started to really change that. So there is current legislation going on to get this funded properly. DAA override, that's our capital override, $3 million, desegregation of 50,000. So our DAA general budget limit or our capital or our UCO general budget limit, we predicted almost 7.5, came in at 7.7, and that's mainly based on the budget balance carry forward. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, and President Valle, great question. We think about capital and M&O bonds. Each fund is used specifically. So for capital, we can only buy capital items, which we're talking about buildings, buses, vehicles, equipment, furniture, technology. So this account can only buy out of that, out of those categories or functions. In the M&O account, you can't buy buildings, you can't buy furniture, you can't buy vehicles. So the M&O account is for operational spending, which is salaries and benefits, where the capital budget is not for operational spendings. And yeah, no, great question. And when we go through the Auditor General's report, you'll see how that a part of that section is a contributor to districts when they're labeled at risk financially. And that's when you're transferring capital money over to the M&O account. And whenever we get to the Auditor General's report, you'll be able to see that. Yeah.
Are we recording? We are today, right? Okay, just want to say my question out loud. So since capital DSEG funds, I mean, they don't change in M&O and they don't change in DSEG. What are some examples of stuff that we would spend in the DSEG?
Yeah, so DSEG Capital Fund would be Chromebooks,
So equipment,
equipment, yep.
okay,
Sensory room,
furniture,
if we do
something.
have a part of what our DSEG plan is, we can look at what our DSEG plan has, what's capital for the kids.
Perfect.
Yep.
Just wanted to clear that up in my.
Yep. Our next slide. So part of the overall budget is where are we right now? Where is the district financially? And we want to be transparent to the board and show them. So I do keep an Excel spreadsheet that I monitor on my own. And I take the data that's directly out of our accounting software, ERP Pro, Tyler Infinite Visions. So I wanted to present to the board, where are we? And you'll see the M&O, so each one has its own fund. And these are kind of our larger funds that we really want to monitor. Now we do monitor all of them, but these are the larger ones that I wanted to bring to the board today. So on the first one, our M&O, we have a budget of 50.962 million. The expenditures of 32.7 million, that's what we've expended from July 1. So July 1 until I just ran this report yesterday. These numbers are updated as of yesterday. Then you see PO encumbrance, that's our purchase order encumbrance. We have about 3.7 million. And then PR encumbrance, that's our payroll encumbrance. So where do we think we're going to spend in M&O and payroll from now until June 30th? When we're looking at this, June 30th is the date I always have in mind. Where are we going to end the year? The more accurate we are at ending the year, the more accurate we are presenting data to the board and saying, hey, this is where we're at. So right now, we're about a $1.3 million budget balance carry forward. Now, we also have to keep in mind, there is some PO encumbrance and there is some payroll encumbrance that might not be true. So for example, our PO encumbrance, we might have a purchase order for $500,000, but we're not going to use that whole remaining budget in that $500,000 encumbrance. So that's going to go right back to our budget balance carry forward. So I want to keep that in mind so the board understands that. And likewise for payroll, if we do have an employee who resigns early, then that purchase or that payroll encumbrance is not true. Capital, as you can see, we're looking at about almost $1 million budget balance carry forward. Classroom site fund, about 3.8 million. Self-insurance. Now we are self-insured. It was $7.6 million. Now this account we do generate interest on this account. So we're looking at about 789,000 remaining budget capacity in that account. Medicaid, 4.5 million, about 2.8 million left. Indirect costs, 3 million, about 1.4 million left on that one. Food service, $7 million budget. Total expenditures, 3.3. Remaining budget, about 1.1. And then our instructional improvement fund, we have about a $2 million budget, 463,000 in expenditures, and about 1.4 remaining on instructional improvement. So when we're coming to the board and we're recommending financial decisions, we're basing it off of all this data that we've gone through and we've talked to cabinet. And is it financially stable for the district to absorb this cost? So any questions on that? Yeah, Dr. Bowman.
Just for clarity, when you have remaining budget on all of these, is that what's anticipated as of June 30th?
That's what is anticipated. So the remaining budget, you will see, I do have a BBCF column in there. That's the budget balance carry forward. So at one point, once we do our you can start putting in our budget balance carry forward in that section. So, it's our goal as a district to have, a 5 to 10% budget balance carry forward on the M&O account. If you take 10% out of the budget of 50.9 million, that would mean we need $5 million or we would like $5 million budget balance carry forward. And as you can see, we're at $1.3 million budget balance carry forward. So I don't think we're there yet to put the budget balance carry forward, but we are working to get there. Now, it is good to understand the self-insurance, the Medicaid, the indirect costs, the food service, and the instructional improvement. These are cash accounts. So these are like your personal bank account. If you have cash in there, you can use it. If you don't have cash in there, you can't use it. To where the M&O account, the capital account, and the classroom site fund account are more budgeted accounts. So these accounts can go negative throughout the year. But to understand, we can't have our expenditures at max capacity. So prime example, in the M&O account, if our expenditures, it says 32.7, if they were at 50.963, we couldn't do that because our budget capacity is 50.962. So that's something we do monitor every single week whenever we either do a accounts payable voucher or a payroll voucher. We do monitor those expenditures.
For my purposes, outside of the M&O capital and classroom site funds, which I think I understand sort of the legislative and the statutory environment better. Can you help me understand how the self-insurance, but in particular food service line items or sort of budget spheres are the sources and uses of that? Like, I just don't have a great sense of food service, what the sources are of those dollars, and then uses to the extent they're restricted, or what's happening on sources and uses for both self-insurance and food service.
Yeah, absolutely. So the food service account is a 510 account, which is in the USFR, a cash account. However, the revenue that's generated from this food service account is called the National School Lunch Program or the National School Breakfast Program. And that is a federal, so it's really a federal grant. So the restrictions are now we are procuring or following the EGGR, which is the federal law book with means to expenditures, and it is restricted.
So for instance, for the food service line item 510, do we at July 1, start of a new fiscal year, are we funded with a cash grant of that full dollar amount?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're not funded from a cash grant. It is a grant, but it's a reimbursement grant to where we provide meals to the students. We are 100% free and reduced lunch where our students do not pay. So as they're taking meals, we're counting those meals and we're sending in a reimbursement each month to ensure that we get the funding for them.
And it's important to note on those reimbursement accounts, we're monitored on a regular basis to make sure that we are following the rules of the free and reduced lunch meal programs. So it looks at how many fruits and vegetables did students take? Did we provide all of the menu options that are necessary to qualify in order to be reimbursed for those? And that's part of why our food and nutrition team is so adamant about being present on the campuses to monitor what's happening and what our students are having, and why working with our students to make sure that the lunches are appealing to them matters, because if they are not eating or taking the items, that's not reimbursable for us.
So just for my purpose, again, I appreciate it. That's very helpful. Like, to draw a distinction, self-insurance is just basically funded through effectively a cash position that's just been built up over time. But the food service line item, to the extent we're doing, I mean, that although we're floating cash on a temporary basis for that, periodically throughout the year, using a cash position that I guess has also been built up over time, we anticipate a dollar for dollar grant refunding for that
Yeah. so-
entire line item,
Yep. So for
like
it-
budget neutral.
exactly,
right?
it's well, so you might, yeah, so you might and this is where the food service director comes into play, because if we're paying $1 million for food, but we're getting reimbursed $1.2 million, that's where that is a successful program, right? A lot of districts might say, hey, break even is what we want to do in that account, because what we're paying is what we're getting back. But this account does generate interest as well. So with that interest, it goes back into their budget capacity. Now, this is not a budget account, it is a cash account. So whatever interest goes back, it goes directly back to them. To where interest in the M&O account, if we generate interest in the M&O account, that's where we come up with dead cash. So we don't want to generate interest in the M&O account. We do want to generate interest in those in the indirect, the food service, and the Medicaid accounts.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That's good for now. I appreciate it.
So I'm going to ask a clarifying question to make sure I understand. So on cash accounts such as these that we have here, the insurance, Medicaid, indirect food service, because those are cash accounts, we can bank that money and earn interest on them. That interest is then what helps to support building up a budget balance for those accounts.
You're exactly correct, Dr. Gonzalez. Those accounts, we do want to generate interest. And then that interest, we're able to use that interest in the means of what that account can do. So we think about grants are very restricted, M&O is restricted, and then our cash accounts is, I don't want to say completely unrestricted, but it gives the district more flexibility to how we want to use it. If we want to use it for student programs, or if we want to use it for other means within the district. So we do want to generate. Now, this is the first year, and I'm looking at Dr. Bowman. This is the first year we are self-insured. Yep. So this is the first year. Dr. Bowman and his team last year did a great job to get us self-insured this year, and we're seeing correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Bowman, I think we saw when we went to self-insured, we did see an expenditure decrease. I don't know how much it was, but we're able now to use that interest to help in our future years at the district.
Can you help me understand how the self-insurance program we're doing now interacts with our premiums due to the trust? Like how does that work?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to get, I guess, too far down the rabbit hole, but it's a big enough line item enough. We're self-insuring, like, a 10% miss on that's like a real amount of money.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can go over what has happened this year.
Sure. Yeah.
So the trust, just want to make sure the trust is our insurance. They handle all of our liability, property claims. The self-insured, we're with Valley Schools. Valley Schools is our self-insurance. And what we saw this year with us being self-insured, we saw almost a 7% increase from our rates from last year to this year, our premiums, when the state average, maybe even the national average, was anywhere from 10 to 17% increase. So we're seeing a advantageous to the district that we are self-insured, and we're using the interest that we're gaining from that account to help support next year's budget, next year's premiums. If they do increase, we're able to provide that benefit to our staff that we're not passing or may not pass that expense onto them.
Let me add just a little bit, is when we started the process with Valley Schools, and you're going to see in the consent agenda on April 16th, you're going to see our renewal for our insurance benefits for our employees. But they were talking crazy. They were talking like a 30% increase 2 years ago. So that's why we went out to bid with our broker. And that's why we came in with Valley Schools. And on the self-insurance side of it, just in year one, when you look at do the actions match the words? And what they said, I think they actually did better than that. So having a relatively it's right under 7% increase this year. And then the huge advantage, I'm just repeating what Aaron said, was that we can, because of the way we did it, we gain interest on the investment. And so we made nearly $400,000 of interest, which is going to cover
Yeah,
the
awesome.
cost for our employees this next year. So when you see that, and we're looking at, look at the cost of gasoline, just as an example, and we're able to contain our healthcare costs so that we don't have to pass on a dollar to our employees this year. That's astounding to me. So that shows the promise to me has exceeded what they said. So I don't know if that helps or not, but it's just been huge for us. And what we hope is, like any group insurance, is that we minimize our experience. I know we all like to have the insurance, but the less we use it, then the better it is for our future going forward. And right now we started off the year trending just absolutely fabulous. And then lately we've been trickling back up to where we were before, and that's going to impact our rates going forward. But we're already locked in for 26, 27. So probably more than maybe what the question was, but we're really excited about this opportunity for our staff.
Yeah, that's helpful. I appreciate it.
And then just another point of clarification. The trust is, as Aaron was saying, our district liability.
Yeah, general liability. Yeah.
And that comes out of M&O, so that's not a cash
But
account.
that makes sense. Yeah, I just was trying to track so that the sort of personnel health insurance side versus the trust is handled differently, but that makes sense to me.
Absolutely. So as we move on in the presentation, now we're going to start seeing visuals that we want to show the board and show the community. Is what we did is this is the Auditor General's report. And on the right-hand column, you'll see school year 24-25. And on the left-hand column, you'll see school year 25-26. The one thing, when we look at when the Auditor General's report comes out every December, January for prior year, they're taking the data that we submitted through our annual financial report, and they're putting all that data into categories. So we already know this information. We have all this information. So that's how come we're able to actually show the board and show the community, where are we at in 26 classroom spending? Where are we at in 26 non-classroom spending? So we created this report so that the board and community can see and compare the two. Because typically the 25-26, this data won't come out from the Auditor General until next December or next January. So if we can put this in front of the board's eyes before it even comes out, and we're talking 8 months before it comes out, we're able to make those informed decisions. So you'll see in school year 24-25, 49% went to instruction. As of right now, we're at 51% in instruction. Student support, 12%, not much of a change there. Instruction support, 8% on both sides, not much of a change there. Then we go to administration in 24-25, we had 10% in administration, and in 26, we're at 8%. So we've reduced 2% there. Plant operations, we have 12% in 24-25. We increased 3% from 25-26. Food service, we see a 4% decrease from last year to this year. And we see a 1% increase in our transportation. So I want to get this in front of the board so that they're able to see it, the community is able to see it. Where are we at as a district, and where's our dollars going? Yeah, so this is plant operations. You're going to see the maintenance and facilities. And as our buildings are aging, that's why we're seeing that 3% increase. The transportation obviously is transportation. Administration, this is superintendent's office. This is the governing board. And this is also cabinet members could be in here as well. Instructional support. This is the support that teachers get. So it doesn't go directly to the students, but it is involved in the classroom. And that's why an example would be Dr. Alshire.
Okay.
He supports the principals who support the teachers who support the students. So they're in the classroom function because of they directly support the teachers. Mhm. Student support, this is going to be that directly support the students. This is going to be nurses. It could be psychologists, OT, PT, those staff that they work with the kids, but it's not instruction related. It's helping them. Social workers are in here as well. And then instruction, that is the teachers those individuals are involved directly with the students. Now you'll see in food service, last year we had 6%, we went to 2%. Do want to mention, we do have to do what's called a food service match. That is part of the NSLP grant that the district has to match a certain percentage of their expenditures. Our food service match is about $150,000. Now you can either do it through M&O or you can do it through capital. And you'll see we had a significant decrease. And that is because we're actually doing it through capital this year. We're gonna, we gave the Mr. Ross, the food service director, we said, hey, you need salad bars. That's an equipment. We'll purchase your salad bars through our capital. That's where we're gonna meet the food service match this year. So as we go on to the next slide, again, this is another visual. Our current fiscal year 26, these are all M&O expenditures. And you'll see that our salaries are eating up most of the pie here at 66%. 16% goes to benefits, 12% goes to purchase professional services, 2% purchase property services, other purchase services, 1% supplies, 3%. And dues and fees is about 0.1%. Now, when we did this report last year, we were at 86% in salaries and benefits. Right now, you add the 66% or the 66% and the 16%, we're at 82% in salaries and benefits. So this shows the board and shows the community, we are actively working to bring that salaries and benefits down to where it's not eating up the entire pie. So we went from 86% last year to right now, currently we're at 82%. So that shows what we're doing and where our allocations are going. Purchase professional services. This is going to be our substitutes. This is going to be anybody that we purchase for a professional gain. It's going to be our substitutes, any vendors we might bring in. Purchase property services. This is going to be mostly our utilities. So our trash, our water, we're purchasing a property service that directly affects our property. Other purchase services, not a big one, but this is going to be anybody that we need that we don't have the expertise in our district. We're going to hire out. Could be a demographer, such as a demographer where we don't have a demographer in our district, so we're going to hire out. So supplies are just that, supplies. Fuel is a big consumption of one of our supplies. And then dues and fees, again, it's about 0.1%. This is anything, memberships or anything that we are a part of as a district. That's where those fundings go to. Any questions on that one? And the numbers were ran through June 30th. So we can show the board this is the whole entire fiscal year, what we're projecting and what we've actually spent. So on the next slide, this is where we want to show the projected, where we're at now and projected for fiscal year 27. So we're seeing our weighted ADM right now at 6,100. We saw this a couple of slides ago. It was when we had the adopted, the revised, and the current. So these numbers are exactly from where we project we are right now. So next year, we're seeing about a 487 weighted ADM decrease. So it's good to understand weighted ADM is not enrollment. weighted ADM is not, it includes, it's not people, it includes their sped weight too. So if they are a sped student, this is including that. The base level amount, you'll see 5,113.26. Through the Arizona Constitution, it's guaranteed a 2% inflation rate. So 2% off that is 52.15.53 or $102.27 increase. The 2% is mandatory. Anything above 2%, the legislation can they can go above it. It's not to say, hey, it's just 2% every year. A couple of years ago, the governor actually signed, I think it was a 4 or 5% increase to the base level amount. Base level control limit, we'll see about a $1.8 million decrease in that. Again, transportation revenue control limit is going to stay the same for next year. The audit service adjustment, next year, our audit is $39,000. This is our non-federal audit. And that's typical for inflation for our contracts with our auditors. Our RCL will see a $1.9 million decrease. And that's directly contributed to that weighted ADM at the very top there. Budget balance carry forward, put $1 million in there. See about a $395,000 decrease there. Additional add-ons. So because next year budget is still going through the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, I put in a $600,000 kind of retainer in there. We're not sure exactly what those numbers are going to be until the JLBC, the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, does come back with what their recommendations are. Desegregation stays the same. M&O override, we are going to see a decrease in our M&O override. Why? Because we saw a decrease in our RCL, our revenue control limit. We saw a 1.9 million decrease in our RCL. So that directly impacts the M&O override of $308,000 projected. Overall, our M&O GBL for fiscal year 27, we're looking at a almost $2.7 million decrease in our budget, going from a 50.9 million in 26 to a 48.2 million in 27. And how we are addressing that is we go back to the pie. Where's most of our money being spent? It's in salaries and benefits. So that's where we're addressing that budget shortfall for next year, is through making sure that we're working with Dr. Bowman and ensuring that we're aligning to industry standards, or having a district standard for class sizes, for custodial, for transportation. So we're looking at all functions of the district to ensure that we're being fiscally responsible. We know this number's coming. What is the district doing now to ensure the budget, the district is meeting those budget constraints for the next year and the year after that. And as we dive into this meeting deeper and we look at the long-term plans, we're going to be able to see, hey, what are we doing in 5 years, 10 years? What does that look like from the district standpoint? So any questions on the fiscal year 27 projected budget?
I have one on ADM that I'm certain we'll come back to, so I don't want to have the conversation before the conversation about the long-term planning of that number. But just for transparency, because this is a weighted number, is it possible to describe the unweighted number that went into this weighted assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. I have that data right here for you. So the unweighted number,
I think I think it's a useful and kind of transparent tool to include within this document.
and we do, in one of our packets, we do have the enrollment where we showed what the unweighted and what the weighted ADM is, and we can pull into that right now. So if you guys want to pull this sheet up that has the unweighted ADM fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 27 packet. That's a great question to lead us into this segue.
I saw it the other day, but I just thought this is helpful. Yeah. Use this one.
So the document that we have in front of you, and we looked at the unweighted ADM, we went back to fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 27. So the unweighted ADM, these are students, and it's good to understand, these are students that we are getting funding for. This is not enrollment. We do have a packet later on where we actually show the enrollment numbers. So when you're talking about budget, you can't talk about enrollment. You have to talk about unweighted and weighted ADM because that's what we're funding for. So in 2019, the unweighted ADM was 5,917. In fiscal year 27, what we're projecting is 3,741 unweighted ADM. When we talk about unweighted ADM, what students are not included in there is preschool. If they're not have a disability, those students are not in there. And then if they do have a disability, it's not the full funding. So it's not a 1 FTE. It's a 0.25 FTE. And then also kindergarten is funded at 0.5. So if we have 400 kindergarten students, we're actually only getting funding for 200 of them because it's a half-day program. So want to be very transparent to the board, to the community. When we look at these numbers, these are what we're getting funding for, not enrollment numbers. So from 19 to 27, we're seeing about a 2175 unweighted ADM decline. Our weighted ADM, and I put these two together so you can see our weighted ADM, that is in 19, we almost had 7,936. In 27, we're projecting that 5,612. Or in the 8 years, we're seeing a 2,324 weighted ADM decline. Our base level amount, you'll see, and this is typo error, it went from $4,009.57 to, it says 215, but it's actually $5,215.53, or about a $1,200 increase from fiscal year 29. Base level control limit went from 31.8 to 29.3, or $2.5 million decrease. And we talked about the transportation revenue control limit. This is where you'll see it didn't change. It hasn't changed in quite some time. So fiscal year 19 is the same as what we're projecting next year. Our audit service. So in fiscal year 29, we had $33,000 to do our non-federal audit. In 27, it's going to cost us $39,000. Our RCL went from 33.1 in 19 to 30.6, or $2.5 million decrease. Budget balance carry forward. This is where we want to build that 10%. So in 19, there was a $3.9 million budget balance carry forward. We're projecting a $1 million budget balance carry forward, or almost a $3 million decline. Additional add-ons. In 19, you can see there was only 258,000. We're projecting a 600,000, or an increase of about 341,000. Desegregation, as we mentioned, this is another one that hasn't changed. It's still going to be the same. The M&O override, we're seeing a little bit of an increase there. But overall, from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 27, we're going to see almost a $6 million decline in our GBL, or our M&O general budget limit. So wanted to bring that to the board, so we're very transparent on that. Any questions on there?
It does. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to be able to have that for purposes of I guess the transparency, while we're just describing the summary budget for next year, before we talk about sort of strategic aspect of it, just so people can see what the spread is.
Absolutely. And so if you flip to the next page, this is another report we did for, this is our Auditor General report. We wanted to compare 19 to 20 to 26. This is the data we know. And you can see where our spending went, and where we increased and where we decreased. ener- energy savings right here. But this is where, and board member Graham, this is where we do have the enrollment numbers on here. So these are the total people or total students that that are in our district. So these are the actual head counts. In fiscal year 19, we had 6,692. If you look back, and this is a good thing to look back at the prior page, our unweighted ADM in 19 was 5,917 kids. But when you look at the enrollment for 19, we had 6,692 kids. So we were only getting funding, or we were not getting funding for almost 700 students. Almost 700 students in 2019, we were not getting funding for. And you can look back in fiscal year 2026, 27 numbers. Sorry, I did not put 26 unweighted ADM. 26 unweighted ADM right now is 3,999, or about 4,000. So if you look in fiscal year 26, our unweighted ADM is about 4,000, but our enrollment is 4,563 kids. So there's 563 kids that we're getting no funding from the state level at all. So the district is absorbing those costs, and majority of those are going to be in preschool and are going to be in kindergarten, because kindergarten is funded at 50% and preschool is only funded with a disability. So when we pulled these numbers, when we talked about charging for preschool programs, this is what we were basing our numbers off of. Is in the past, the ESSER program or ESSER grant picked up that cost for the parents. We ran out of ESSER. The district now would have had to pick up that cost. So when we're looking at it, there's about 5,000 or 563 students that we are getting no funding for, or from the state level, So if we go back to the classroom spending, we compared 19 and 26. So the board is able to see where are we spending money. Plant operations saw the biggest increase, and that's because our buildings are now 8 years older than they were in 2019. Our HVAC units are now 8 years older than they were in 2019. So it correlate to what is the district doing, and the numbers really speak to what's happening in the district. Average teacher salary, you'll see we went from 63,000 in 19 to 72,000 in 26. Teacher experience, we did see a reduction in the teacher experience. The percent of teachers with 4+ years of experience, I was not able to pull that data for 2019, but you can see in 26 we're with teachers with 4 years or more, 10.38 years is our average.
Board Member Edmiston, do you have any questions?
Not at this time. Thank you.
I have a question. This is Carmen Trujillo. I remember learning about transportation, and the more times our buses are moving, how it benefits us. Can you, let's see, gather my head around this number not changing, but how our transportation numbers help us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe you're talking about the transportation support limit and the transportation revenue control limit. The transportation revenue control limit, it's a formula that was done several years ago. The transportation revenue control limit is basically what the state says, this is what it costs to operate your transportation department. Now, as you see, in 2019, we received the same as what we've received today. So the TRCL is actually helping the district because we are a declining district. It's in the opposite way, the budget reduces your RCL, where now our TRCL stays the same. So as our M&O budget's going down, our transportation budget's staying the same. What changes is the transportation support limit. So during COVID, when buses were not traveling, they were not putting miles on the buses. They weren't. So what happened is the transportation support limit, the formula is ridership, how many daily miles they're traveling, and how many ridership. And it comes up to, okay, this is how much, and multiplied by the date or the rate miles, which right now is about $3 a mile. I think it's 306 a mile. And it comes up with a formula that generates their TSL amount. So if our TSL amount, well, we know our TRCL amount is 1,329,000. The goal is to get the transportation support limit as close as we can to the TRCL amount. The state picks up the tab from $0 to the TSL amount. So if the TSL amount is $1,329,798, the state is paying for all that. And how do you drive up the TSL amount? You add riders, you add miles to the routes, you keep the buses going. It's as simple as that. The more the buses are traveling, the higher that TSL amount is going to go. As we saw during COVID, the less the bus is traveling, the lower that TSL amount is going. From the TSL amount to the TRCL amount, that's what the local taxpayer picks up. And they're assessed in August, that's what they're assessed off of. So we want to drive that TSL amount as high as we can because it reduces the local taxpayer amount to where the state is now picking up majority of the tab, not our local taxpayers. Does that make sense? Perfect. Any other questions regarding the Auditor General's report, the budget, or the budget, projected budgets, where we're at right now, before we move on to the Auditor General report?
And so as we continue through this, this really is, as Board Member Graham alluded earlier, this is foundational to our conversations coming up about long-term planning, about our DSEG plan and how we're using it, and really thinking about all of these factors that impact budget. Not only are we building a budget balance carry forward, but how are we thinking about adding additional miles so that we can get our TSL up closer to the TRCL? I'm getting better every year. And thinking also about knowing that we don't have the full funding for preschool and kindergarten, but being able to see when we have students who attend our preschools, that when 50% of them come to our schools from preschool, we are at least getting 50% funding. And when they come to our kindergartens, they tend to stay with us. So all of these are questions that we want to, as we continue going through these, looking at all of these different elements, because it's all part of formulating how we make decisions about programming in the future. So with that, we'll go ahead and transition if there are no more questions on the budget itself. We'll take a look at our auditor budget, our auditor, the State Auditor General, who will provide an overview and look at how we're comparing to others in the state, but also what we're doing in our own district to continually work on improvement. Any questions on the first part?
No, yeah, I think for me, we can come back to the budget once we're in context of the conversation.
All right. Mr. Whittle, want to walk us through the Auditor General reports?
Absolutely. So we have two packets here of the Auditor General reports. And you'll see one says the state of Arizona and one says Phoenix Elementary School District. So we're able to compare them side by side. We'll dive a little bit deeper into the Phoenix Elementary one. And then there is some reports in here that shows our peers. And then we can look at the state, overall the state, and where does Phoenix Elementary fill in within the state guidelines. So This report comes out, like I mentioned, every December, January of every single year. It's an annual report. It's done through the Arizona Auditor General's office. The numbers that they're taking is the numbers that we're providing on our annual financial report. So it's nothing we don't already know. They're just taking our numbers and putting it into a report that they can show the state and they can show the governing board and they can have that transparency. So the first page goes over our county, our operation, our CTDS number. So if you'll see like the 9312, these are all of our CTDS numbers, county, town, district, and school. That's what CTDS stands for. And these are just overall students attending 4583 and 25. 5-year change. These are some good things to see. 5-year change in students attending, 19% decrease. As we saw in our reports just a little bit ago, from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 26, we've seen a huge decrease in our student enrollment and our unweighted ADM, and our weighted ADM also goes to our special education population, our English learners, our poverty rate, and there is no graduation rate because we are a elementary school district, not a high school district. So when we look at this, this is 25's data. And as we kind of touched on earlier, it goes through where's our money going? 68.8% is going to the classroom, 31.2% is going to non-classroom. Now, I believe there is potential legislation being introduced that we have to spend 50%. I don't remember if it's classroom spending or instruction spending. I think it's classroom spending. So you can see if the legislation does pass at the 50% must go to classroom spending, we're way above that. We're at 68.8%. So we're well above that. Our non-classroom spending, the 31.2%. Now, what's great about the district and us being transparent is we actually showed you guys what the 26 numbers are well before they even come out. So we're able to compare those right now. If you go to the next page. So this is a huge, an overall view of the district finances and instructional spending percentage. And the Auditor General has done a really good job to be transparent, to show where the money is going and to show prior year, to show current fiscal year, show the highest fiscal year. You'll see in the instructional spending, 57.1% was spent in instruction in 2005. So the district is able to see the historical data to see where were we last year, where are we at this year. In 24, we were at 50.1%. 25, we dipped to 48.8%. Our lowest fiscal year was in 2023 at 47.6%. And you think about, why does that occur? Why does that happen? And the Auditor General here does a great job of explaining why do we monitor that? Why do we want to be held accountable and showing where our money is going? And this is a good opportunity for the board, for the community to actually see where are we spending our dollars. On the next page, you'll see the percentage points change in spending by area. Classroom change in classroom spending, as we saw, we went from 50% down to 48%. So we saw 3.8% in instruction decrease. We saw 1.2% in student support, a 0.4% in instruction. And then our non-classroom spending, we saw a 0.3% in administration, 0.8% in plant services, food service, 0.7%, and transportation, 0.4%. So again, this is to see the 5-year comparison and also to understand what report are we looking at. So on the Auditor General's report, they've made it really nice to where you can go and you can do the drop down. You'll see up there, this is the district's fiscal year 20 spending. So this is a 5-year spending report. And understand that over 5 years, we've seen a 2.2% decrease in classroom spending. And this is over a 5-year period, not a 1-year period. So definitely want to understand what report are you looking at. So if you go to the next page, we'll look at, now we're going to do, again, the drop-down menu is a 1-year comparison. So from 24 to 25, what's the difference? And we actually see a positive increase of 0.2% in classroom spending. And what's the correlation from 24 to 25? We saw instruction dip by 1.3%, but we saw instructional support increase by 1.3%. So is that a direct correlation? Hey, did we reduce teachers, but brought on more instructional coaches in that manner? So understanding that change in non-classroom spending, we saw a 0.2% decline from 24 to 25, and that mainly was in plant operations and in food service. So if we go to the next page, this is kind of what we, kind of a report that we show. And when the district does reports for the board, we want to mimic what the public is seeing. We don't want to make it our own. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But if this is what the Auditor General is putting out there, this is what we want to put out there as well. So it correlates with each other. So you'll see you'll be able to review from District FY24 to FY25 where we saw those changes. And this again goes through classroom spending, non-classroom spending, and then total operation and land and buildings. So the land and buildings this is coming directly from the school facilities department, so that we have everything we do when it's in regards to our schools, we have to notify the SFD so that they're able to keep up with the school closures last year. We had to tell the SFD that we close these schools down. If we are to relocate a school, we have to tell the SFD, and SFD, everything has to go through their board as well. So everything gets, so you'll see on the instructional support, we increased by $199. And then we decreased on all classroom spending. So classroom spending overall went up, but the reductions we saw in the total per student spending went down by $3,466. What's the direct correlation with that? The less funding we get. Lower the budget, the less spending we're able to spend on those kids. So that's why we do the percent wise to look at, where's our money going? If we had a 50 and in 24, I believe it was a $64 million budget in fiscal year 24. And then in 25, it dropped to a $55 million budget because of the budget balance carry forward. ESSER ran out. The district had to really much eat up all that budget balance carry forward from 24. And that's where you'll see a lot of that in there as well, is the budget balance carry forward was 8 million coming into 24. And then coming into 25, it reduced to 2 million. So we go to the next page. This is now we're able to look at our peers in fiscal year 25. So where did we, again, look at the top, the peer districts FY25 average spending. So you can see we are way above our peers and where we're spending. Where are we below, or where are we need more help is our land and buildings, our equipment, and our total non-operational spending. We're negative 1127. But if you look at where our peers in the classroom were $719 above per student. At our peers are at about 8,000 to where we're at 9, 10, 11, about 14,000. So we're seeing a huge, compared to our peers, 3,500 directly related to the kids. Our peers are at 62, we're at 9,700, 9,760. So $3,500 more we're spending on our students than our peers. And our total per student spending, we're 5,889 more than our peers. Our peers are at 18,000, we're at 24,000 on our per student spending. We'll go to the next page. And now we'll look at the statewide FY25 average spending between the district and the statewide average. And you'll see most of the categories were well above what the statewide average is. Instruction over $3,200 compared to the statewide. In instruction, student support 1,100, instructional support 833. So our total statewide average, it's about 16,000 statewide, and our district is at 24,221, or we are spending on average $8,239 more from other districts in the state on an average, statewide average.
Director Whittle, can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
So looking at, and forgive my ignorance, looking at the number on the total operational, where we see the statewide is 12,559, our district's 19,986, with a difference of $7,433 between them. The other operational costs that we have in here, plant operations, food service, transportation, obviously doesn't equal 19,986. So what is that total operational cost? What else is being lumped in there that makes us so much higher than what the state average is?
On the total operation, the
Mhm.
19,986.
Right, and the statewide average is 12,000. So in terms of difference between us and the state, and that was the same true with peer districts, that's the highest, us spending more in that area than our peers or in the state. So what else is in that total operational cost that I'm not seeing in the spreadsheet?
Yeah, so the total operational cost is the classroom spending and the non-classroom spending.
Oh, it's okay. So it's those two together.
Yeah,
Got it.
all of those added up.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So if you take classroom spending, the categories in there, and then take the non-classroom spending, that's where you get the total operational costs. So we're about, and just operational costs, as Dr. Alshire just mentioned, we're about 7,433 more than the state average of us spending directly to our kids. Now we want to talk about just briefly, where does this data come from? This data comes directly from our annual financial report, which is audited, right? So it goes to our auditors. They're able to audit to ensure that we are staying in compliance. Because if we're not staying in compliance, then we could be skewing the numbers. And that's why we do have those audits, so that we can show that we are in compliance. So when we are looking at this, you want to be very mindful that the numbers that are presented to the Arizona Auditor General's office is numbers that have been audited and have gone through that process. Yeah, Dr. Bowman.
What are the funding sources for this report?
Yeah, so funding sources are all funds with exception to bonds. It's how they pull out the functions. So when you look at how they're labeled, this is through the function. So instruction is function 1,000, student support is 2,100, instructional support is 2,200, administration is 2,300, plant operations is 2,600, food service is 3,100, transportation is 2,700. So when you're looking at how are they pulling out, they're pulling it out through the function. So for example, when we have a bond building, it's function 4,700, and that would be land and buildings. So that's how it's separated through the funding, is it's taking into account all the funding, but you're not going to see, as we mentioned earlier, the different pots of money. You can't use capital for M&O, and you can't use M&O for capital. Same thing with bond. If land and buildings, If we're using bond, we can't use that for classroom spending and instruction. So that's how it's separated, is through the function of each category. And if you look on the bottom of their operational efficiency measures, this is something that is very, it's a precursor to where the district is headed. And this is something that we look at to ensure, hey, we're getting ahead of it before it becomes a problem. So when you look at administration, the state average or peer average in our district, we're very high in administration costs. But if you look at the students per administrative position, 59, 59, 36, okay, maybe we have too many administrators per student, but now that dives into, are we coding stuff correctly? Are we accurately coding through the USFR or Uniform System of Financial Regulations? Are we coding it correctly that we do have administrators? So this is eye-opening to me because you want to look at all aspects. When it says very high, that's very alarming to me. Plant operations, very high. We're spending a lot of money, and you'll see, where does the square footage come? Square footage comes directly from the school facilities division. They have all of our buildings, so they're able to pull that data. Food service spending per meal, very, very high on there, very high. So those are things that we look at as a district, and hey, how do we get this lower? And we work with our team, and we collaborate and work with the community. Hey, we are labeled as a very high. We're also very high, but you look at our spending to our students. Our spending to students is very high, in my opinion, to where we're spending over $8,000 more than the statewide average. And so when we're looking at the data, we'll go to the next page here. When we're looking at the numbers and how we're doing, all of this is through what's called our chart of accounts. Our chart of accounts is very important because it's how every single district in Arizona codes everything. So when we talk about budget codes, when you guys see our budget that we present every year, it has a bunch of codes on here, just a bunch of codes. And as I mentioned, you go off the function. When I got on board, we were trying to, a year ago, we were trying to distinguish, how much are we spending at this school? How much are we spending at that school? So we can get a hang of it or get a handle over what's going on. And when I was doing that, I noticed that we had a lot of coding errors. And a couple ago, the district did get put into corrective action plan through the Auditor General's office. And one of the things was those coding errors. So when I came in, we were able to start changing our chart of accounts to make it more simplified and make it more easy to understand. The chart of accounts, the USFR tells us how we have to do it, but doesn't tell us exactly how we have to do it. So there's some leeway for us. So what we did last year is we simplified the chart of accounts and made it more simple without losing the integrity of the data. And that's what we did starting last year when I came in and cleaned up 25 going forward. So now we're able to show that and have more precise numbers whenever it comes to the chart of accounts. So chart of accounts is huge in school districts, and we've created that simplified, but without losing the integrity of the data. So when we look at transportation, our transportation is very high. And then we come to our student enrollment. Why do we want to monitor our enrollment? 99% of our budget is through enrollment, 99%. And I'm going to look at Dr. Alshire. I don't know federal programs, but I'm sure federal programs is probably 99% on enrollment. So how we're funded, why is enrollment important, is it's 99, I would say 99% of how we get funding. So when you look at our enrollment overview from 2001 to 2025, this is a 24-year. In 2001, we had 8,136 kids. Now, keep in mind, enrollment is different than weighted ADM. So when we look at weighted ADM, in 8,136 kids, it's probably weighted ADM was probably around 7,500. If we're going off 500 this year and what we've seen historically, but we're seeing in 25, our enrollment was 4,583 kids. That's a huge change. That's over 3,600 students. 3,700 students from 2001 to 25. And then even just the 5-year enrollment change from 2020 to 2025, it's a 19% or about 1,100 students we've lost since 2020. And so when we did our projections that we showed the board for fiscal year 27 projected numbers, we're taking the trends. And last year was an anomaly. We did not see, I projected a 200 student or weighted ADM decrease, and we saw 500 weighted ADM decrease. So last year was definitely an anomaly. The years prior to that, it was a 200 student decrease is what we are seeing. Next year, I hope we don't see another 500 student, but I'm going to budget on 500 student decrease because it happened this year and it could happen again next year. So when we're looking at that, we are monitoring our trends. And I will say last year was an anomaly with it. It just spiked. And you'll see that in the data and why our budget has dropped so much.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so looking at the projections for 27, just to clarify, you're making the assumption that there is going to be enrollment decline?
Yes, I am assuming we are going to have an enrollment decline.
And in the information that's been presented so far, can you detail exactly the number that you're assuming for 27? And if making that assumption, how that breaks down by the school or the geographic area when you're making that assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did an overview. I can break it down and I can present that at a later date to you. I'm projecting a weighted ADM decrease of 487 weighted ADM. And that was in our first packet that we looked at on the difference from 26 to 27 projected.
Okay, and just to clarify, is that different from unweighted?
Yeah, so weighted ADM is students, including any special education needs that they may need. So when a student does have a specific disability, there is weights attributed to that disability that, for example, if a student is hearing impaired, the district might receive an additional 4 weighted ADM to fund for that student. Now, when I'm doing the projections, I'm looking at enrollment from our kindergartners, from our preschoolers, and I'm also looking at enrollment from our 8th graders. So the 8th graders are matriculating, we're losing them. They're now going to high school. Who is replacing them in the preschool and the kindergarten program? And looking at that data. So that's 85% of what I'm looking at is what 8th graders are matriculating and what preschool and kinder are coming in.
Board Member Edmiston, in your packet, there is a color chart that comes from Synergy. This is Synergy data that was taken yesterday afternoon. And on the very beginning, it shows you the total enrollment of 4,476. This is part of the data that we use as we're predicting our student enrollment. And Dr. Bowman uses the Synergy data and does a 4-year regression analysis to look at what has our pattern been. Is it still 4 years, Dr. Bowman? looks at our regression analysis to understand what are the predictive patterns that we can see in terms of enrollment by grade level and by school. So if you look on the second page of that packet, you can see our enrollment by grade level. And then if you look right below that chart, you can see enrollment by school. So one of the things that we're seeing, most of our schools are at about 400 to 500 students. We have a couple of exceptions, but since we've done the consolidations, we've been able to really concentrate on trying to have about 400 students in each school. That helps us prepare with our staffing. And so when we are issuing contracts, we have to understand what our enrollment looks like at each of those schools so that we can have our staffing already in place. The hardest thing to do is to try to find teachers in the fall after everyone has been placed. So that's part of the work that Dr. Bowman and our instructional team work on at this time of year.
Vice President, and since Jed Bowman here, what I'd like to add to your part of your question is that the changes that we can anticipate going into 26, 27 is we compared to what we projected for the current school year, we did not materialize the student prediction at Garfield, at Edison, and Capital. Those were all schools that were impacted by changes last year where we over projected the student number and we staffed it accordingly. And what we did see this year too, but we saw growth at Bethune. So just to kind of let you know a little bit more of that. And what I'll do is I'll prepare a board update for you with projected numbers.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, great question, Vice President Edmiston. And it goes to show when we are looking at this, we're looking at the totality of the enrollment from Head Start all the way to our 8th graders. And even if you look at the data, our 8th graders were matriculating 502 students, and our next highest grade is 5th grade at 486 students. So we're going to see, over the years, we might see it stabilize, but we are. And then from preschool, so again, remember preschool, we don't get full funding for preschool. And then kindergarten, we only get 50% funding. So our kindergarten program is 419 students that we're getting half funding or 50% funding for. So once they go into 1st grade, that 419 will get full funding. And if you look at our preschoolers, it's 262 preschoolers. And this is where we dive into how old are they? Is this their 1st year in preschool? Are they 3? Or are they 4 and this is their 2nd year in preschool? So, okay, we'll get them in kindergarten and we'll get partial funding for them in kindergarten. So we're diving deep into that analysis of what does projections look like for next year, because those play a major role, especially in our Head Start, our preschool, and our kindergartners and our 8th graders. So when we go back to why monitor, well, we talked about student enrollment. So why monitor average teacher salary? And Dr. Bowman, if you could help me on this one, I mean, it is very important that we monitor our average teacher salary, because if we have what's called Classroom Site Fund, and we also have what's called a TEI, or is our Teacher Experience Index. And part of the M&O formula that builds our GBL or our general budget limit, part of the formula is TEI, Teacher Experience Index. If we have teachers that have a large amount of experience in the district, the state through the funding says you're not going to be able to pay a 20-year teacher at an incoming rate. So part of the funding, hey, if you have more experienced teachers, we'll pay you more. So why do we want to monitor the average teacher salary is because that's very important. Are we attracting and are we retaining highly qualified staff that do have that teacher experience? Dr. Bowman, would you be able to mention? Sorry for throwing you on the spot.
I've always liked the microphone, so thank you. For the board members, except for board member Trujillo, we, 3 years ago, we did a comprehensive study of teacher salaries in the region. And we implemented a new compensation model that went from a step system to a stepless system. And the primary reason for that was we created ranges of pay versus a guaranteed step scale, which, as we know, in a year like this year, it wouldn't be guaranteed. So we'd be likely frozen. And it gives us way more latitude to be able to do something versus nothing. And what we did when that happened was we wanted to ensure that our district starting teacher salary was way more competitive than what it was. And what was done at the time was a market analysis, and not the goal. What we did was we put the midpoint of the ranges at the 60th percentile of the market. And then the goal is to move teachers across the ranges as much as we can to get them to that 60th percentile. So that's where we still are. And when you ask why is it important to monitor the average teacher salary, is when we made that change going from, I think our starting salary was in the high 30s to the low 50s, we all of a sudden were in the game for getting way better pools of candidates and able to solve our staffing shortages that were much more pervasive before I started here than when I began. So we're still there, but what's happening since we've made that change is now some of our neighbors and friends are catching up a little bit. So we're in that challenge of we want to continue to be higher in the market for our district, because at the end of the day, we know that the primary reason is nothing matters more than a quality teacher. Nothing matters more than that in a school system. So if we can start off at a higher rate and we can treat people well and have a climate and culture that matches, and this is the soapbox part of the microphone. But when we have all that, then we know that the promise for the future of our students is has a better chance of being fulfilled. So that's what we're doing. That's why the average teacher salary matters a lot. And we're going to continue to work on being as competitive as we can of what we can afford. And where we are in the near future is our classroom site fund, which we shifted a lot of performance-based pay to base salary. We're going to continue. We still have some movement that we can do there. And we're hoping to be able to do a little bit more shifting into the base salary of our classroom teachers so that we can continue to have that competitive market position. Dr. Whittle, how's that?
I love doctor. But and the average teacher salary is important because what is the biggest pot in the budget? Salaries. So we got to take that in consideration. As we saw, 66% of the budget's just in salaries, 16% is in benefit. So it's really important when we're doing the benefits package. We do have an attractive benefits package, but we're also being able to financially be stable to afford that. And having 66% of the salaries, this is where it's very important to monitor that. And as you'll see on the board here is our classroom site fund. The average on the classroom site fund from the state is $11,572 is what the average is. Our average as a district is 9,060. And as Dr. Bowman was saying, there's still some work to be done. We are currently working on that we can present something to the board that the board can look at and hopefully approve it at some point. But we do need to shift or we need to look at shifting classroom site fund more into the base salary so that we're able to attract and retain those highly qualified staff. And here's the district average over fiscal year 27, or sorry, fiscal year 17 to now and where we're at. And you'll see amount of classroom site funding, classroom site fund. So in 19, 20, and 21, the district put a lot towards the classroom site fund to the base salary. And then 22, it went down, 23, it went down, 24, it went down, and now 25, it's starting to go back up. So when we look at the classroom site fund on the, when we saw all those bank accounts and we saw classroom site fund had 3.88 million remaining, you can see, oh, that's where we built that budget balance carry forward was from 21 to 22. And then 23 to 24, we took a dip. So it all correlates. It all, the data we're showing, it all shows why it's doing it. And this report is coming from the state. So it's not coming directly from us. And here's our district average teacher salary and other teachers measured from fiscal year 17. And you'll see the NA and the report that we gave the board when we compared 27 to or 26 to 19. You'll see the average base salary of teachers in their fourth year or later. It was NA because it wasn't tracked during that time. And then student achievement. You can look at student achievement here, district, peers, and statewide averages. This is for math, ELA, and science, where math we're with our peers, little more than our peers. ELA, high above our peers, still below the state average, and then science, we're right with our peers. And I don't want to talk on behalf of student achievement. Data's there for the board to see and the community to see. And this is why we do this every month. We come to the board and we have presentations of our student achievement so we can monitor it just like we're monitoring our budget. Any questions regarding the Auditor General report?
Yeah, again, I don't want to have like the conversation before the conversation as we move into the more strategic aspect of this, but just a point of note. I mean, for my purposes, I do want to like kind of call people's attention, just say to me, notable in an area of concern is like, I think I no doubt like the spirit of how I've looked at this is how to get more dollars in the place where it's moving the needle. And I am always open to being sort of convinced about what that is, but without a doubt, I mean, one thing that's high level important or potentially above all others is having the right people doing the instruction. And I think that I just am noting that a challenge that is like informs everything about the way I think about this, at least, is watching what has happened with our frankly like exploding costs on some things that are, maybe not that controversial. Plant services, I think everyone will look at that and say that's not good that we're spending $1,000 more per student than our peers and potentially the state as well on things like those fixed costs that, I mean, that's certainly clearly dollars that could just be going into support or teachers themselves. But I also think it is notable just that think about the sort of the side effects of what has happened with our declining enrollment. I mean, obviously everyone's on the same page that we've got to turn that ship around. And so I look forward to, obviously continuing to talk about that as the most important thing we can do to stabilize this scenario. But it is worth noting that you look at things like the students per teacher, that number has also trended down faster than I would argue we're losing students. And so there are things like that you look at and you think, well, that's interesting. At least I don't know what to do with that information necessarily, but just thinking about where the dollars are allocated, I think it's certainly worthy and exciting that we've been able to raise the salary so much for those early career teachers and attract like dynamic young talent in that regard. That's certainly important to me, but there are trade-offs here. And right now we're in a position where I think it's easy for me to say, I know you guys are working on this every day. Suffice to say, there are more trade-offs that we're going to need to make here. And plant services is a problem. It's not going to solve the whole issue.
And I think as we look at that plant services line, it's important to note that is not just our plant services, it's our maintenance of all of the plant, the district.
Yeah,
plant.
of
So it
course.
includes our buildings and,
course.
yeah. At this time. Excuse me, at this time, do people want to take a little break? Do you, yes, I've seen,
I have
yeah.
to run to the restroom. Yeah. that's
Okay,
great.
so
Thank
we'll
you.
take, let's take a 10-minute break and we'll start back at 11 o'clock.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Whittle. I was gonna say, I'm gonna say this publicly, but I wanted to tell you too, is that I've been, since I come to the district and I go back to, the accounting department, and your team speaks very highly of you. I know that you really put a lot of work into this and getting the department back into shape. I know that you've done a lot of work, and then going in there, seeing like the stacks of papers and stuff like that, and I know you mentioned like the miscodings and stuff like that and having to deal with that. So I just want to thank you for that. I mean, I'm gonna say it publicly, but it's just on my mind right now. Cause you did a lot, you know what I mean?
And
the
not
team
just-
is really
Yeah,
happy.
the team is very happy and it's not the business service. It's also working.
I mean, yeah, I called the other day and he answered. I was like, hello?
It was good, but I like that. And the kids. No, it's a key.
Yeah. Valentino does a pretty good job.
He was out.
Oh, actually, yeah.
Does anyone need more coffee?
Hey,
No, we just stay like explaining budgets. I'll take it when you're explaining budget outside of that.
Is that Christina?
I'll be in power.
Out of how many? That's,
It is.
that's too many.
I know.
It's like-
Fine. Dude, you're like the first
It's just-
person
it's
I
right now.
speak to.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started again. And Ms. Sims, I know you are online, but this is going to be a part where we know you're going to have a lot of support to help give us some information. So as we look at our long-term planning, we've gone through our budget process. We're going to devote this last hour really to that long-term planning and talking a little bit about DSEG, because while that's not necessarily the meat of our long-term planning, it definitely helps to support that. So the first thing that we have here is the demographic report that was prepared by Applied Economics in 23-24. This was part of the Reimagine process. So we can go ahead and take a look, and Mr. Whittle, do you want to kind of walk us, the executive summary, I think, is pretty straightforward. It does talk about our declining enrollment, and particularly the K-2 cohort in 2014, 2015 that declined dramatically, leading to lower numbers down the road. But then the other thing it talks about is that 36% of our students come from outside the district. And I think that's important for us as we continue to think about how we recruit more students to the district, is how are we taking care of the students who live within our district, but simultaneously, how are we attracting people to our district with the kinds of programs and supports that students need? 36% are outside the district. The other is the population of the district has grown, but and by the district, we mean the boundaries of the district in the city of Phoenix. But we do know that while there have been 5,000 housing units and almost 4,000 households sold since 2020, that does not necessarily equate to people with children or people who are sending their children to our districts. So we've got to be able to think about how we become attractive to both groups of people. The K-8 charter school enrollment has also increased. And one of the pain points, with the exception of a 700 student increase in 2016, 2017, due to the opening of the ASU preparatory campuses, annual charter enrollment growth since 2010, 2011 has been fairly small. We know that that trajectory has changed over the past few years with the increase of people taking advantage of the empowerment scholarships. But this just kind of gives us the very last three bullets. Overall enrollment by school is well below normal program capacity. That's part of that issue that we were looking at and part of what drives up plant costs. And then over the next 10 years, district enrollment is expected to continue to decline by about 654 students, or 14%, as all but Edison, Kenilworth, and Garfield are projected to experience decreases. Edison and Garfield, it's important to note, those are next to housing developments that had part of the enrollment drop had occurred when the housing developments from the city were being redeveloped. And so many of our students moved because the housing was no longer available. When the housing came back online and they had the new housing developments built, we saw a dramatic increase in enrollment at Edison and Garfield, which was part of the thinking behind creating the K-4 program at Edison and the 5-8 program at Garfield, so we could manage the capacity of increased enrollments at those numbers. And then the pattern of enrollment change for schools that follows the attendance areas over the next 4 to 5 years. Only Edison, Garfield, and Kenilworth are projected to experience enrollment increases of any significance. High enrollment losses range from 16 to 139 students each, expected at 8 schools. The largest decline during the first 5-year period is projected at Herrera. So then the report goes into more in depth, but I think if we look at the slides, that might be telling. And we've pulled out the particular slides, I think, that we want to talk about. Did I make that up? Okay, yeah, here they are. So Sarah, you've created a packet. It includes the, or actually, this was Mr. Whittle. So Mr. Whittle, I'm going to have you walk us through the packet that shows those particular slides from the demographer's report, and we can talk through that and answer some of the questions there.
So one of the slides this is actually from not from our demographer. This is current locations. With, as you see on the slide, this is a map of Herrera Elementary. So when we went through the presentation at our last board meeting, it was talked about where are the students in Herrera boundaries. And so we were able to come up with this, and it plays a direct correlation with what is our long-term plan. So this is a map of all of our students that attend Herrera Elementary and where they're coming from. So 36%, as Dr. Gonzalez mentioned, is coming out of district boundaries. And this is an overview, and I have some slides, as we'll see, that kind of zoom in, but you can see we have students as far as the 303 on the west side, and then we have students as far as Cave Creek on the north side. So these are students that only attend Herrera Elementary. Want to be clear with that. And then on the southern side towards South Mountain, we have several students on that area. So as we as we move on to the next one, the next slide, this is a zoomed in portion. But I do want to mention, if you look at the map, right where you see kind of you can see the 17, and where it says Villa Monte Vista, the word Villa Monte, that is central. That's the boundary of Herrera. So go north and then go up to where the Phoenix Sky Harbor, the word Phoenix Sky Harbor, go up until you hit the word Phoenix, and then cut east to I-10. That is the boundary of Herrera. So to put in perspective, how many students actually live in the actual district of Herrera. And this is another zoomed in model. As you can see, Herrera's district boundaries is central and central is where you see Chase Field, the C, that road that goes north and south, that is central. And then it goes up to about Chase Field or Jefferson, and then it cuts east towards Sky Harbor. So you can see how many students actually live in the boundaries of Herrera. And it is actually, out of the 419 or 420 students, there's 106 students that actually live in the boundaries of Herrera. Now, where is the Fillmore property? According to this, if you go to 7th Street, it's just north of Garfield, the road Garfield there, just north of there, Children's Museum of Phoenix. That's where the Fillmore property is. So you'll be able to see how many students will now, as we talked about the TSL and the TRCL, now those students do become riders, which will drive our TSL level amount up. And then the students that are in the area of Fillmore now become walkers. So that's the trade-off, is the red dots on the bottom now become riders. The red dots on the top now, or on the top right, now become walkers. So on this map, we actually did the boundaries so the board can see what are the boundaries and how is it impacted. So the yellow line is the actual boundaries of Herrera. It does go south a little bit, not very much. And then the other students that we saw on this one, all those red dots south of Herrera, those are not even in the district boundaries. Those are in another district boundaries. So as we can see, most of our students that attend Herrera are coming outside of not only the district boundaries, but also the school boundaries as well. So this is a map blown in. Everything you see here is Herrera's boundaries. These are the 106 students that are in Herrera, and you'll see Herrera is kind of on the north part, or the top kind of left part of this. This is where Herrera is and where those students live in the boundaries. Mhm.
The map of kids coming from the south side. And I think you mentioned in the past that was due to Roosevelt closing. So once we move kids to the Fillmore, are those kids still gonna get picked up and go to the new Herrera?
It's a great question because it's our next slide. Great question, which leads us into our next slide. These are all of the bus stops for Herrera Elementary. As you can see, the Herrera Elementary has the blue boundaries, and we do have several bus stops on the southern part of Phoenix that go all the way to Dobbins and 19th Avenue, pretty much all the way to South Mountain. It is. And also we travel up by magnet. So I wanted to show the board, we have a lot of buses, and then a lot of buses. If you look on the right hand, portion, those are bus stops that are in the Garfield Edison area. So we do have a lot of buses. So Herrera is a unique school because we have students all over, not just the district boundaries, but also outside the district boundaries. And with the Fillmore property being more centrally located, it gives us an opportunity to be more central to where it is about, and Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, about 1.4 miles away between the two.
Yep, right at 1 mile.
Right at 1 mile. So it is a mile
Mhm.
away. But to answer your question, President Ovalle, is do we plan to still send buses down there? Absolutely. When we had the meetings with the parents, it was majority coming from that area that came to our meetings and said and asked the question, will we still have transportation? And we told them, yes, we will still have transportation. And also to bring friends. Say, bring friends with you. We'll send 2 or 3 more buses in there. But yes, to answer your question, we will continue that transportation for those students. Now, in our last board meeting, we heard a lot about transportation and the troubles we have. But the good thing with Herrera is our first. They're our first school that starts in the morning. So they have priority transportation. When transportation, we would adjust the start times to accommodate for the extra miles or the extra bus stops. And that's what we would do for that. So this is a more zoomed in of the bus stops. And again, the blue is the boundaries for Herrera. So we are going, as you can see, we're going outside of the boundaries. We're going outside the district boundaries. And then we still have a lot. And this is where you'll see the Garfield on the upper north corner, the Garfield and the Edison locations that our students, because Herrera is a school that, and Dr. Gonzalez, correct me if I'm wrong, the programming that they have there, we do allow for students all over the district to attend that school.
Mr. Whittle, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to call attention to the proposed boundary change. So if you're looking at the map where we are right now, it would be a direct northern extension from 7th Street over to 9th to include that. And what's interesting or interesting to note with that is then the walking boundary, if we do move Herrera to the Fillmore property, that moves the walking boundary northbound. So it's actually a mile from the school of attendance. And so all of those dots that you're seeing outside of what that 1 mile radius would be of the new location would still be eligible for transportation.
Perfect. So we wanted to put that in front of the board because this is directly impacting our long-term goals of the district and where we see ourselves in 10, 15, 50 years from now is what does that look like? Randy, if we could go back to the
The slide. We will, I think one of the things that's important for us, we've had a lot of conversation about a neighborhood school. And what we can see by looking at this is Herrera is no longer a neighborhood school. There aren't a lot of children in the neighborhood. And we're not giving up on the importance of that neighborhood, or that's part of why we're revitalizing Ann Ott. But what we are trying to do is recognize that people are coming to Herrera for the program, not because of the neighborhood. And so by being able to relocate to the Fillmore property, we believe it's more centrally located. It will attract more students. And it is an easier route for all of those students who are outside the Herrera boundaries already to be able to come to that location. So that's part of the thinking that we wanted to share in that today. And as we continue, you'll see more.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I wanted to have a broad point and then a specific one, but generally we're talking only about Herrera here, but I really appreciate the work that went into this. I think this is, for me, this is indicative of how I think this district has to do business going forward. This analysis is great. I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time with regard to the neighborhood school model. That's a value proposition that we as a traditional public school district can offer, where we have the current and future population density, frankly, to support it. That is not true any longer of every single one of our campuses. And the challenge there is always, and I can say with personal experience, I have lived through my own little version of this years ago with our daughter's preschool. So I am sensitive to being the family, one of the last ones that lives next to the little campus that gets moved. I know that's hard. This is always a trade-off. I think we have to balance with regard to the neighborhood school versus where this district wants to go. But you look at this data is hugely instructive. I know this tells a story about many things, about the nature of Herrera as a specialty program, about past history with closures of potentially other neighboring school districts, schools, demographic changes over time. But this is the soup we live in. The competition is everything. That's not going away. We compete with everybody. We compete with other public school districts. We compete with charters, privates, at-home education. This is the air we breathe now. And I think this is exactly the right way to have this conversation. It doesn't mean we'll always agree about what the conclusion is, but I think this is what we have to consider and not be afraid to be bold about looking at this and letting it tell us certain conclusions, which is, let's get this specialty program that appears to be attracting kids from all over. Let's get it right. Let's make it better. Let's make it the best it can be. And if we have an opportunity to do that, let's go get kids from all over the place. I just, our demographics is interesting. I think in the past, not only for this district, but others, it has been used as I won't use the word as an excuse, but it has been used as destiny when it doesn't have to be. That's not the whole story. I think everybody knows that. We're all competing now, and this is the right way to have this analysis. All that being said, as a broad point, I, again, really appreciate this. I think it tells a very interesting story and is going to be really instructive for how we look at the other schools and start to think of them as is this more of a specialty program? Is this more of a neighborhood school? And that, I think, by the way, the overarching thing that I know comes up from time to time is I want them all to be excellent. I think that's the debate. Sometimes I think I just want to say that for the record, that conversation gets misinterpreted sometimes as if this one's going to be this kind of school, we're going to make sure it's a better one. And then a neighborhood school it just is what it is. That's not the case. The neighborhood schools are going to be just as good as all of our schools. And I want them all to be great. They offer a kind of a different value proposition. But all that being said, to the point, we were talking about it earlier today. We've been talking about it. I certainly hear it repeatedly as a pain point. We have to get the busing right. If this is the direction we're going to do, we cannot mess that up. And you just look at where it is in our budget. It's not it is not the thing that is moving the needle candidly on our top line budget. I don't want to be flippant with the dollars, but again, easy for me to say. I know this, there's been a lot of work on it, and I look forward to our next, meeting. I know we're going to be looking at some options on potentially how to maybe manage this a little better. We must get it right, because that's going to become a real pain point for people as we move to this model for some of our schools.
Thank you for that, Mr. Graham. If I may, I want to make sure that the board is aware how closely we are keeping a pulse on what is happening in neighborhoods and with housing. We have a wonderful relationship with the city of Phoenix, and we understand our schools that are adjacent or next to large multifamily housing units tend to have stable enrollment. Children are choosing the neighborhood school. And so we monitor that very closely. We align programming to that, and we are aware that big changes will be coming to the south portion of the district and Lowell. We are aware of those changes. That housing, multi-unit family housing project of Marcos Deniza is going to be going under refurbishment. We're going to see the same exact enrollment declines and then returns that we saw near Edison. And so I think it's important for us to zoom out as well. We're only talking about Herrera, and we're giving you a visual example of that. But what's interesting to me is Herrera exactly mirrors what that demographic report told us. 40% of kids are coming from outside of the district. I think it was actually 37.8. That's almost to the exact number, the number of out-of-district students that are attending at Herrera. And so I vow to do a better job to show those numbers to you. And we do have some cleanup that needs to be done to make sure that we have all of those numbers solid. But we're trying to do a really good job to understand what's happening with planning and zoning and building and development, so that we are aware what those trends will be. And we understand there will be a dip in the Lowell area, and then there will be a huge return because there will be almost twice as many units returning to that. So I just wanted to make sure the board was aware that we are doing our best to keep our pulse on those trends in the city.
Thank you. And Board Member Graham, you had said something that kind of stuck with me is when businesses compete, the consumer wins. When schools compete, the students win. That's what I heard from your dialogue there, and I really appreciate it, because we're all here for student success. So as we go back onto the demographer's report, we can see kind of the sections when they did this report in 23-24 and what areas they were focused on. The existing conditions, and this one, the percent change, you'll see in 2009, 2010, it took a huge decrease or huge decline. Well, what happened in there? This was the recession. So, and when we come up to 2021, 22, again, we're seeing that COVID hit and then kind of recession area. So, the numbers that we're going, or the data that we're making our recommendations off of are based not only on this, but also on what has happened. And we can compare, this report was in 23-24. We can compare what happened in 24, because when they did this report, it wasn't solidified yet. And we can compare what happened in 25. So we're taking that data that we have, that this is just a estimate, right, of what the projections would be, and we're able to start to see those. So when we start to look at the graphs and we start looking at where are the enrollment increases and where are the enrollment decreases. Now, this is something that I do is I drive around our neighborhoods and I look at development, and we see development going on near Garfield, near Edison. We see development going on near Lowell and Bethune. And one of the things I really focus on is what size are the units that are going in? Are they 1 and 2 bedrooms? You're probably not going to fit a family in a 1 or 2 bedrooms. What are the 3, 4, 5 bedrooms, 3 to 5 bedrooms? There's not very many of those. It's mostly 1 to 2 bedrooms going up right now. Now, I'm not saying that's going to have a direct correlation of how many students we bring in. I think it will, But those are stuff that we take into consideration when we are reviewing these and we are making recommendations of what this district looks like in the future years. So as we go on, we can see on this page, this is the blue is negative enrollment change. The red is a positive enrollment change. So where are we seeing our enrollment changes? In that area by Lowell and Bethune in 2023, 2024, it was projected that there would be enrollment increases in there, and we are seeing that today. In the upper right corner, well, you'll see it's a little bit purple. There's some new apartments going on there that I don't know if they were in the planning for in 23, 24. I think it was a hospital. Oh, yep.
They were just beginning to occupy those units, and so they
Okay.
did not factor in.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I was looking at this as well, just to make sure I'm understanding. Is this our sort of capture rate out of that planning district? Is that what's being reflected here? Or is that just, it's enrollment how? Like enrollment from that planning area in this district?
Yeah.
Like enrollment in any Phoenix L school from that planning unit?
Yeah, it's just based on that area.
Okay, yeah,
That
yeah.
that specific area. What are the city's plans? What's the developer's plans?
But does it, I was confused, this isn't showing just like population increase decline though? Right,
Mm,
yeah, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
no. So, but we can see where are we seeing the majority of the property development going on, right? On the north side, over north of us, we're seeing 24 potential increase, 6 directly in this neighborhood, I think right across the street on Palm Lane. And then over by Lowell and Bethune, we're seeing huge. And then in the area of Herrera, we're seeing huge declines because, and Sarah, again, correct me if I'm wrong, there were 1,100 spots in that area, 1,100 residencies. And over the last several years, there's now 300, a little over 300 left.
So there were 1,183 relocations due to the VARS program, and now there are around 800. So there has been some type of development. Lots may have been purchased. Doesn't mean that there's development on them, but it does mean that they have been purchased from aviation. But again, you have to remember that they can't rebuild residential. So the uses for those lots are really heavily restricted.
So as we're going through the next slide, again, kind of shows where the enrollment changed from 19 to 20. Where did we see those enrollment changes over a 5-year period or 4-year period, 5-year period? We're seeing them right here in the Kenilworth area. We're seeing them in the Emerson area. We're seeing them in the Magnet area, not too much. The one on the lower right, the 10, that one, I don't know about that one. Yeah. Yeah, it's gotta be because that's over by the, actually, hold on, let me see. Nope. So so that's off the 17 there. It's gotta be a very small denominator. Yeah. Yeah. So, and this also shows you, as we saw with the Herrera students, south of this is majority of where the Herrera kids we're sending a bus into that area and getting those kids from that area. Which one are we at?
So if we move forward up to map 6, showing alternate providers, remembering that the alternate providers around this area, according to the demographic report, was we're losing some students, but not a significant number of students to these other providers back in 23, 24, with the exception of the ASU Preparatory Academies, who had 700 students outside the from inside the district. attending the program. You can see there's a range of opportunities next to all of our schools that offer a charter program or alternative program. So the point earlier about being competitive and offering something that's excellent and attractive to people really does make a difference, because we can and we should be competing with those other providers. Another thing that I think is interesting in the demographer report is when we look at the residential permitting, map 7, you can see the number of single-family homes that have been permitted as of 23-20, and again, this is 22-23. The dark black dots on this map represent single-family homes in the district. The blue are examples of the duplexes around the valley. And then the yellow are apartments and condos. So back to the point of 1 and 2 bedroom homes.
And as you can see, those apartments, it's really focused heavily on the downtown area. We're going to see a lot of 1 studios to 1 and 2 bedrooms in those areas.
And so this goes back to the point that we're not going to increase enrollment because there's suddenly an influx of housing available for people. We're going to increase enrollment because of the programming that we're able to offer. Then map 8 shows us some of the future land use. And so this goes back to, you can see the bright red spots across the map show commercial. And obviously now with the development happening in the Central Phoenix revitalization zone, that needs to be updated. And again, it reminds us how quickly things change, because we received this in 23, and 2 years later, or I guess now 3 years later, there's already been some pretty drastic changes. But you can see active single family or single family home future land use is minimal on the map.
Yeah, I mean, this is to state an obvious point. It's helpful to have the analysis and make sure we're not just making this up. Just by instinct, I know that's true. And we should always like revisit this or find, in a best case scenario, friends and partners who will help us with this for cheap or free, ideally, just on a sort of informal consulting basis, just so we have our finger on the pulse of this. But we're not going to get a bunch of attached or detached single family homes in this district in the next 10 years. That's not going to happen. We're going to get, in a better market, more multifamily. But as you noted, the like yield of kids in the new apartment developments is small enough that I don't think it's worth making decisions based only, path of growth. It's just not enough is going to change there in the next 10 years, in my opinion. I think the data is reflecting that, for that to make our decisions for us. It's just, I think we have to do our best where possible to locate facilities where we think we've got the like stable yield, but then just focus on, the honeypot is what's going to get more kids here, right? Not trying to front run development. That's just not, I think, the model for this district. The development will be helpful. It will be supportive. It will yield property taxes. It will be good. We're going to get a lot of good commercial development here. There are things to be excited about if you're operating in this place where we find ourselves, but it's not getting 5,000 kids moving into this district. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. And then
I think that's so, oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think that's so important when we look at how we've shifted doing business. I think a perfect example of that is kindergarten for a day, right? Years ago, our marketing strategy was in district, in district, in district. I'm not saying we don't want to continue to do that, but we have to open our minds to, we do have really great options, and we just need to let people know that they're here. And so when we're looking at the data from our kindergarten for a day, many of those families are not families who live across the street from a neighborhood school and would have just chosen us by default. Those are strategic measures that we have to continue and grow and keep data on to see what are the hot spots. You can clearly see that South Phoenix district that's just south of us. We're attracting children from there, and that's because of our marketing and the events that we're hosting and letting people know these are the quality programs that we have, and we welcome you here. So I think that that's been a bit of a mind shift for us as a district, and it's proven to be beneficial. So just wanted to add that.
So as we begin to start to understand the demography report, what is the district's 10-year plan, 20-year plan, 5-year plan? So we'll start to shifting into what does that look like going in for, the 3 to 5 year, the 5 to 10 year. So we'll start talking about the strategic grouping of proposed and current projects by scope and objectives to help communicate the plan and its student benefits to the plan. And it's the packet with the 1, 2, 3, 4 on the front, modernizing learning environments.
As you're pulling this, this packet, there's a table that goes alongside it that helps you to see what our properties are, what the parcel numbers, square footage is, and whether or not they're available for lease. This is our first stab at the 5-year, 10-year plan, and this is where we're going to ask for some input and some ideas in terms of our thinking. And to Board Member Graham's point, working with our partners. We've been really fortunate to have great partners with the City of Phoenix, the PCA, the Phoenix Community Alliance, and others who are working with us to help us think about what our properties could be, how we can maximize that, but really where we think about what we can do to provide excellent programming for our families and our students coming into the district.
So we'll look at the modernizing learning environments, major renovation. So kind of the scope is comprehensive renovations and these remodels at Edison and Garfield. We're seeing that right now. But we also want to look at Bethune and Lowell, because again, as we saw in the demographers report, there is a lot of activity going on over in the Lowell and Bethune area. So when we start to look at that, we look at number one, where does that cost come from? That would, with what we want to potentially do for that community at Bethune and Lowell, would be through a potential bond. With our capital, we don't get the funding that for a project like this, and most of these are going to be coming through bond, if not 99% of them will be through some type of bond with our community. And we look at the Specialized Programming Center for the Arts. This is establishing the Youth Arts Campus at Herrera as we're going through right now. This is moving Herrera over to the Fillmore property where we can see more youth sports and having that arts at the Fillmore property. Timeline, as we know, we want to do it sooner rather than later, because we also want to attract and retain those enrollments. We want to start getting enrollments for Herrera ASAP, because there are some people, or there are some families I think will stay with the district if they know we're going to be there. Operational efficiency and infrastructure. This is our core supports. So we're looking at Whittier kitchen remodel, a gym at Magnet and Kenilworth. This is us investing in our schools and investing in our kids. The Ann Ott, we talked about moving plant services from its current location over to the Ann Ott property. The Whittier kitchen completion in 2028, and then the plant services in 2028. We do have a 2-year window with our current sale. The 2 year starts in August of this year. So that brings us into 2028. Some strategic asset management, being fiscally responsible, using the HURD, the Dunbar, and the Herrera campuses, and to be revenue generators, bring in revenue, that's sustainability, and we can't say it more, enough times. We would rather lease rather than sell. But if selling is fiscally responsible to the district, we want to explore that option. Because we want to be fiscally responsible, and we want to make sure that our tax dollars are at a minimum. We want to lower our tax rate. So if selling a property, that would go to lower the tax rate. So that's where we have to look at that. We don't want to say we don't want to do that, but we want to look at it if there is a time in, 2030, which is 4 years away, that, hey, things changed, the economy, we need to help out our local taxpayers. We have that option. That's what we want to do. So the idea, and Ms. Sims helped me out on this one, the idea is to generate, the HURD, we're seeing almost $300,000 in revenue. And let me look here on this report here.
Yeah, that's absolutely accurate. 296,000, almost 297.
Okay, so
Lease this year, and we have already heard from our renter there that they do plan to expand even further. We're currently making sure that the building is ready for that expansion, and they are paying per square foot. So I think that's an example of our commitment to the community of bringing something for public benefit. It's amazing the day program that they have there and the services for students on the spectrum in a private setting. So that has just been a wonderful way for us to better utilize the building, continue to have services for the community. We kept our Head Start program at HURD. So I just think it's a really good point of origin for us to model after. We've learned a lot. And continuing that with our other properties that are available and underutilized.
In the HURD property, we're getting 296,500. That's for at or below 50% of the property being rebuilt.
It's about in between 40 and 50% of the building is being utilized by the renter.
So 50%, and we're almost getting 300,000. We still have 50% of the building that we can rent out. So it puts it into perspective when you're saying, oh, you're getting 300,000. Yeah, that's at 50% of the building. So if we do go out to 100%, there's potential of, $600,000 a year that's coming in through that revenue generate. Yep.
How much was ASU Prep paying us for rent on a yearly?
So ASU Prep was paying us, Ms. Sims, do you know the answer to that?
600,000.
600,000. And ASU Prep or our Fillmore property was 2 or 3 times the size of HURD.
HURD is about, you can see on the chart there, ASU Prep's about 170,000 square feet, which equated, you can do the math, around $3 a square foot. The HURD rental rate right now is $20.50.
So HURD's at 71,000 square feet. The Fillmore property is 170,000. So about 100,000 more square feet. And we're getting, based on the numbers, if it was 100% occupied, we're getting about the same rate as the Fillmore property.
We're getting about the same revenue, not the same rate.
Sorry, the same revenue. So as we go on to, kind of some more strategic 5-year facility plan, want to target, to have revenue generating of about 3 million annually by 2030, to backfill half of what the Fillmore property parcel sell. So when we did an analysis of what the Fillmore property, what we should be receiving in current rent, and Ms. Sims, again, help me out here. I believe it was around 2 to 3 million is what we should have been billing the tenant. That's the market rate.
That is correct.
So we definitely, we are, with the tenant moving out, 600,000, but we're seeing that we're replacing that. And we're working to get that number even higher than what we were receiving in the past. So that leaves us with available real estates, as we mentioned, is the Fillmore property, the Herrera Academic Building and Playground, and other opportunities, including Dunbar, Hurd, the Herrera Pack. I think the Herrera Pack is a great revenue generating that we could tap into from a long-term plan. And it's also, we want to come back to it, when we lease, it can go towards M&O expenditures, such as programming for our students. When we sell, it's got to go to capital. So I don't think we can say that enough. We just want to keep reminding the district. And then we also provided the downtown demand. So what are the prices from downtown? The market, $24 to $34 per square foot, and up to $40 for retail. So this could generate an additional 1.9 million of 7 acres of downtown land to about 270,000 per acre annually is what we want to look to. And that's with today's market, as we know, the inflation and the ongoing increases that we're seeing. These numbers could go even higher in the future. So when we look at the summary of revenue drivers that are going to be strategic in our long-term plan, we want to show the board and show the community what is available, what are the key objectives, and where do we stand on that with all of our properties. We do have a lot of properties, and we have prime real estate in Arizona. I believe we are probably the only district that has prime real estate as we do, other than potentially our high school union, who is also in our district as well.
Prospective tenants or leases who are interested in looking at Dunbar? I haven't heard an update in a while, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, we've had a ton of interest. I think, as I've told the board previously, many of the inquiries that we receive are individuals who believe that they should be allowed to use the property at no cost. Many of them have, opportunities that would be great for the public, but legal continues to remind us that we can't gift public funds, and that if someone wants to use our facilities that our taxpayers have approved, and we're not allowed to let someone come in at no cost. And so we look at those. We still continue to have our review committee in place, and as any kind of proposition comes in, it's put through the review committee. Many of them just haven't been able to prove that they have the financial backing. We are asking for proof of payment, 12 months payment history. And so that's been a barrier for some. And then others just weren't willing to pay for use of the facility. What we have been doing with Dunbar is a lot of short-term rentals. We just wrapped up a project there this week, actually. We had a 4-day rental for a company that paid $6,000 for the use of the building over 4 days. And so when you look at some of those short-term rentals, those have been really beneficial to us. We've also needed the building for our own use. We provided, the GAP meals there when SNAP was suspended. And so we are continuing to use the building, and inquiries do keep coming in. We haven't formally marketed that building. I think that's a step that we'll go to. We want to see exactly what the district needs and what those possibilities are internally before we go and make a long-term commitment. So it's a really up and coming area that I think is going to have a lot of possibility for us in the Dunbar area. Did we want to continue down the timeline, or could I say just a few things about the other document? Dr. Gonzalez, I don't want to sidetrack you.
Yeah, no, let's go ahead and say a couple more. I think the timeline is self-explanatory, but go ahead and talk about the other documents some more.
If we could look at the spreadsheet, Randy, I'm not sure if you have ability to pull that up, and it may be in all of your packets, but I did want to just, it has was asked of me a couple of times to show building capacity, size of buildings, size of parcels. And so I just wondered if anyone had any specific questions when looking at that document. Thank you so much. You're able to see the parcel size, and that is acreage, obviously, and then the square footage of the building, the capacity that's determined by SFD, the current enrollment, if there are students currently at that site, the percent occupied, and then just kind of a year of build and then the year of renovations or modifications. I also just want to keep it top of mind that we do have voter approval to sell, lease, or exchange any of our properties. And so I added that to the chart. At the bottom of the chart, just you'll see our rented properties or our currently leased properties, the amount that we receive annually for each of those properties, and then when the lease either renews or terminates. And so just wanted us to have a visual of kind of what income is coming in and going into that civic account, again, in those very flexible usage fund pots of money. Did anyone have any questions after reviewing any of this data?
And I just want to mention one thing that really throws out a number here is if you look at the new times and the property status lease end date, this is 230,000 a year all the way until 2044. So that is over 20 or almost 20 years that we're still generating revenue. And if you look at the herd location, it expires in 2 years. So even just looking at the two, what makes you feel more comfortable with a revenue generating? Is it that it expires in 2044 or the 2028? And they're both about the same, a little bit more for the herd property, but that's why we want to engage in those long-term lease agreements so that we can secure the financial stability for the district and the people to come after us and the students to come after us.
One other point with the new times lease, that lease amount is dependent on the consumer price index. And so that just revaluated in April. And so there was a significant rental increase, and that's built into the lease. So each time the CPI revalues, the lease is modified. And that's an agreement within the lease is that they will continue to pay based on the CPI. So that's really beneficial to the district.
So any other questions, do want to set some time. We got about 10 minutes, 12 minutes left to go over the desegregation plan and what the district has been doing to ensure the plan is met and that the budgets, we do have a desegregation budget and the budgets are being in compliance with what the plan states. So we'll shift into the desegregation plan.
So the desegregation order, it's important to note that this came out of a federal court ruling that we needed to end racial isolation of students in underperforming schools in 1984. And then there was a follow-up action that required that we ensure English language learners receive quality instruction to improve English proficiency by 1993. The objectives that we had to meet were to make sure that the funds were educationally justified to help students achieve state standards, that funds allocated provided equal opportunities for all students across the district to participate in programs that encouraged higher levels of engagement, including opportunities to compete and/or perform in district track events, choir, festivals, spelling bee, sports programs, science and engineering fairs, speech and debate contests, cultural exchanges, and others. And then Funds create systematic organizational changes that are lasting in their impact to mediate the violations from 1984 and 1993. So when we looked at this plan, we wanted to make sure that it was updated to comply with these orders. And so the first one that we looked at was the I'm going to make it one word, academic equity strategies. And what we've done with this is we're creating back to how we're funding things, making sure that it's very clear, adding the subject code for each of these areas so that we can track where we're actually spending these monies and what impact we see from this. But part of this is developing those strategies to close achievement gaps and ensure equitable access to high quality education, including high impact teaching practices. So supporting programming that supports our signature programs like the health sciences innovations, entrepreneurship and ecological sciences at Garfield, fine and performing arts at Herrera, the dual language immersion program at Lowell, Math and Science Academy at Magnet, and the Montessori, Shaw Montessori program. Those are kind of signature programs that we're talking about. And so we want to make sure that we are putting support toward the quality of instruction that goes into that and training for teachers to deliver high quality programming there. But we also want to make sure that we're providing targeted support for struggling students through the use of targeted small group instruction, additional tutoring and interventions, expanding access to advanced coursework and gifted programs. And so later on this year, you'll see some of the work that's going into expanding our gifted opportunities and making sure that we're at every campus, there are opportunities that enrich our gifted students and that develop giftedness in places where that has not been a focus in the past. We also are working on creating more grade banded opportunities. And remember, grade banding means that you have more than one teacher at each grade level so that the teachers have a cohort with which they can plan and provide instruction to their grade level. When we look at the next part of this, this is enhanced ESL and multilingual education. Developing a plan to improve our ESL and our multilingual programs. And you've been able to see this in action through our ongoing monitor of our board goal 3. But implementing those research-based instructional practices, both for dual language, but also for our students who are acquiring English as their second language. So all of these pieces, we've talked about the intensive professional development, the ability to have interventionists who are teaching side by side with teachers, implementing the sheltered immersion observational protocol and the structured English immersion. And then increasing parent engagement in schools with ESL programs through English classes and literacy classes using our family community engagement specialists. Resource equity was another one that was really important to us to make sure that all of our schools have access. So we've implemented the fund, and this comes from the superintendent guardrails that we've reported on as well. But implementing a weighted student funding formula to provide additional budget resources to schools with the highest poverty rates for the full day kindergarten. Targeting additional resources for schools with high concentrations of ELs by making sure that the English language interventionists are supported there, and upgrading facilities and technologies in every one of our schools, beginning with those identified as most impacted by poverty, language, and exceptional needs by 2030. And we've already established that baseline, and so it's maintaining that. So the next one is district-wide integrated activities. We currently have outstanding program opportunities for students with many of our partners, including BizTown, the Spirit of the West Cultural Museum, Phoenix Zoo, State Capitol. This is another one of the superintendent guardrails that we've added to make sure that all of our students have access to these. Because one of the things that we had heard in talking about the school closures was that some of our schools had no field experiences whatsoever. And it was because they didn't have the funds to be able to do that. So we said that shouldn't be a barrier. That should be an expectation that we create that. We've also created our district-wide spelling bee that you got to see. You also got to see last month, or I guess it's still this month, last week, our district-wide science fair, and the school's participating in that. And so we're going to continue to grow those activities. We've also got the track and field event. We've got an upcoming music festival and choir festival. And we expect to add robotics, speech and debate, mathletes, and other sports and conditioning opportunities across the district. And then providing multiple opportunities to develop student leadership and their advocacy through the Superintendent Student Leadership Advisory Council, ARCH, our site councils, and other student leadership opportunities that we can bring. Then in terms of accountability and monitoring, this plan creates a regular schedule for monitoring, both through our board monitoring reports that we provide and the superintendent guardrail monitoring. But we also go through, again, focusing on that coding to make sure that we can provide an accurate coding of where the money has been spent, both to the Office of Civil Rights, if it comes back into full form, but for our community first and foremost. And then creating that system for addressing any complaints and working with the community stakeholders to ensure that we're focused on continuous improvement. And then here's some of the ways in which we have allocated budget for that. The dual language instruction and newcomer center, the gifted and talented program across the district, professional development for signature programming and summer planning, the high quality teacher training and retention. And in fact, we've also celebrated some of the national board certification teachers that have been achieving that level of accomplishment. And then the field experiences, and here's the example of the programs that we have for each grade level and where they go. And finally, the district-wide events and competitions. So those are the kinds of things that we are adding to all of our schools and all of our programs through our DSEG funding. And we will welcome questions or thoughts both on the DSEG planning, but also on the facilities planning so that we can provide a clear roadmap for the direction that we want to go.
And I just want to input real quick. The desegregation is part of the M&O fund. So just because we say it's a DSEG expense, we still have to follow all laws related to the maintenance and operations fund. And that's why we do have $50,000 separated in our capital fund, because we could buy computers, Chromebooks, furniture, equipment. So just want to let the curriculum, the board know that DSEG is a budget within the M&O budget. So it's a budget within the budget. We still have to conform to the laws of the M&O expenditures.
Questions from anybody? All right. So I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the team for putting a really good presentation together. I got to thank Mr. Whittle during the break for his hard work in the accounting department. I know it was a lot of work that you stepped into. And I want to give a shout out to the team. I don't know if they're watching, but let them know. They seem really happy under your leadership, and, they said a lot of great things the other day when I was in there, and I know it was authentic. So I love that. And I appreciate the hard work and everything that you put into this today. And I'm hoping that this is a step forward in us building transparency with our community, families, and everybody, that participates in our meetings. So let this be the first step, or, the first of many steps. And I want to thank my colleagues for coming together with me, helping me build the agenda, and supporting me in something new that I'm learning myself. So thank you so much. With that, it is now noon, And I move that we adjourn the meeting if there aren't any other questions.
This is Carmen. I'll second the motion. Board Member Trujillo? Hi. Board Member Graham?
Yes.
Vice President Edmiston? Vice President Edmiston?
She dropped off the call.
Okay. President Ovalle?
Yes, and with that, we close the agenda. Thank you again, everybody else, and I look forward to seeing you at our next governing board meeting on April 16th. Thank you and have a nice day.